Welcome, everyone. Today we are joined by Dr. Nisha Phillip-Malahoo, who is a third grade teacher at Pinewood Elementary School. She has been a teacher for 13 years. Dr. Phillip-Malahoo earned her doctorate in curriculum and instruction from the University of Central Florida, with her dissertation titled Lesson Study as a Catalyst for Including Concepts and Procedures in Planning and Implementing Fraction-Based Mathematics Lessons, an elementary school case study. Prior to her doctorate, she obtained her master's degree in K-8 mathematics and science education from the University of Central Florida. Dr. Phillip-Malahoo's goal is to prepare students to successfully navigate the ever-changing, increasingly complex world by equipping them with skills in science, technology, engineering, and math, while simultaneously fostering equitable and inclusive teaching practices. Today's workshop will be an interactive 90-minute session that introduces participants to lesson study, a collaborative, teacher-driven framework for professional development that centers on improving student learning through reflective practice. Drawing from a grade 3 case study in a Title I school, attendees will explore the lesson study cycle of plan, teach, reflect, refine, engage in hands-on stimulations, and learn facilitation and coaching strategies that foster adaptive, student-centered instruction. It is ideal for educators and instructional leaders seeking to deepen collaboration and elevate teaching through inquiry and reflection. I'm going to hand this off over to Dr. Phillip-Malahoo.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited and honored to be in this space with you. I thank you for coming to this session, and I thank you for having me here. My name is Nisha, and I have spent 13 years working in schools that serve diverse populations. Today, we're going to explore how lesson study can transform mathematics instruction by centering collaboration, equity, and student thinking. Now, this session, guys, it's going to be highly interactive. I want you to experience lesson study as participants. I want you to practice its techniques and leave with concrete plans for implementation. And I'll connect everything back to MathKind's principles of effective teaching throughout our time together. So a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I have 13 years of experience teaching in a Title I school. Title I in America, it means that the students all qualify for low or reduced lunch because they come from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And one thing that I've learned throughout my 13 years is that when teachers collaborate to understand their students' thinking, all students can achieve well in math. So I'm here for it. Before I get started, I wanted to pause here and ground ourselves in the MathKind's principles of effective teaching. These principles weren't created in isolation. They were shaped through the voices of researchers working hand in hand with classroom educators. That's why they resonate so deeply with me. They're built for real classrooms across all contexts. The first principle is focus on important content. As teachers, we know we can't teach everything. So we got to ask ourselves, what really matters? What do students need to carry forward into future learning? This principle reminds us to prioritize the mathematics that has the greatest impact. The second principle is to provide rich tasks. Now, this is not worksheets filled with routine problems. Rich tasks open doors for exploration. They allow students to think critically, to connect math to the real world, and to show us not just what they know, but how are they reasoning. The third principle is to ask questions and listen. Our role simply isn't to explain. That's just surface level. When we ask why or how do you know, and then we listen, We create a classroom culture where mistakes are stepping stones and students learn as much as from each other as they do from us. Our fourth principle is ensure equitable engagement. Every student deserves a voice in a math conversation. That means structuring our lessons so that it isn't just the loudest kids or the quickest kids who participate. We want to bring in students' interests. We want to rotate the roles. We want to create opportunities where all learners see themselves reflected in the math. And the fifth principle is to monitor learning and provide feedback. This principle is about relationships as much as it is about instruction. When we pay attention to what students are doing, when we give feedback that is supportive and actionable, and when we use evidence of their learning to adjust our teaching, it is about responding in real time to what our students are showing us. So these 5 principles are our anchor for today. As we continue this session through planning, teaching, observing, and reflecting, I'm going to keep coming back to these principles as they are the lens through which we examine not only our lessons, but our practice as a whole. So my learning objectives for today, for this session, I have 3. My objectives are directly aligned with Matkind's principle of effective teaching, and you'll see them interwoven throughout our work together today. In this workshop, I'm focusing mainly on 3 objectives, and the other 2 would be interwoven. The first objective is ensuring equitable engagement. We look at what lesson study is and how it creates a space for all students and teachers to participate meaningful in mathematics education. My second objective is to show collaborative growth and reflective practice. This ties back to Matkind's monitor learning and provide feedback, because our job is to pay close attention to what students show us and respond in ways that move their thinking forward. And my last objective is to provide adaptive, student-centered instruction. And this ties directly into Matkind's providing rich task, because we want students to do more than just follow steps. We want them to explore and reason and connect math to their work. And as I mentioned, the other 2 principles, ask questions and listen and focus on important content, they're embedded in everything that I'm going to do today, from the lesson design to the way we reflect together. Throughout this session, I encourage you to think about how these principles apply in your context. And as we move through today's lesson study cycle, I'll call out moments when I'm demonstrating each principle in action, so you can see not just theory, but you can see this in practice. Now, before we get started, I'd like to hear from you. You can use the QR code and scan, or you can type your answer directly into the chat. I'd like you to pause for a minute and reflect. What does effective professional development look like to you? Think for a moment about the best professional learning you've experienced. What made it valuable? Was it practical? Was it collaborative? Did it give you tools that you could use the very next day in your classroom? So if you would put it in the chat for me, or if you would scan the QR code, and just let me know, what does effective professional development look like to you? Right? I got a couple of responses, and I'm going to create a word cloud based on those responses. So in a second, if you would just let it generate. All right. I have asked this question several times to several different conferences that I gave, and the answer I most likely get is collaboration. Effective professional development looks like collaboration. It's like what we're doing here. We're sitting together and we're sharing about math. We're sharing ideas. We're learning from each other, and we're aspiring to build something together. But here's something important. When I ask my colleagues in Florida, what does collaborating mean? And when they tell me collaboration and I dig deep, well, what does collaboration mean? It means that we're meeting to share lesson plans. It means that we're dividing up tasks or we're talking about what's coming up in math. And that's valuable. But that usually just stays at the surface level of learning. If all we're doing when we meet and we only scratch the surface, we're not pushing students' learning forward. It's a good start. Now, my colleagues in Florida said, but Nisha, we already have professional development. Why do we need lesson study? And they got a valid point because they didn't understand the differences between these two structures. Most schools have professional development. I am making an assumption that your school does, or you have places and spaces where you meet to learn more about your pedagogical content. And in Florida, we have certain days and time built into the schedule. But here's the thing, though. Not all collaboration leads to deep changes in teaching and learning. Sometimes, at least in my school, professional PD feels like it's about compliance or quick fixes rather than authentic growth. So here's what makes lesson study different is the depth and the focus. Instead of talking about strategies in an abstract way, teachers are actually working together on a single lesson plan. They're carefully planning it, they're teaching it, they're observing students learning, and then they're coming back and they're reflecting on it. So it moves beyond general collaboration into a cycle of inquiry that is tied directly back to students' thinking and outcomes. So, yes, we do collaborate, but lesson study takes that collaboration to a whole different level. It's not about doing more PD, it's about doing PD differently with purpose, precision, and a lens on student learning. So, I wanted to share a little bit of my history with traditional professional development, PD for short. In a traditional PD, the information that we are given, it's more top down. It's disconnected from daily practice. Traditional professional development tends to focus on data reporting or on administrative tasks. In a professional development, teachers are typically passive recipients. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's designed with good intentions. It's giving teachers a time to come together and to talk about their practice. But too often, these PDs become rushed, or they're just solely focused on data, or they're disconnected from the day-to-day realities of student learning. So this is where lesson study comes from. And it builds from this deficit. So if you would allow me to just tell you a little bit of the history, because I believe if we know the history of how lesson study started, then we can better utilize it and push it forward. So lesson study actually originated in Japan. Many, many years ago, the country was moving away from an agricultural-based society into a new age of industrialization. But there was a problem. Japan didn't have the money to invest in training new teachers all the time. So instead of pouring money into big reforms that they didn't have the money to do, teachers began supporting one another. And if you think about that, that's not terribly something new. A long time ago, apprentices would learn from their masters. There would be an expert and there would be an apprentice. And that's how learning would happen informally and by doing. So in Japan, experienced teachers would open up their classrooms and they would model lessons so that novice teachers could observe and learn and discuss what worked. It was a grassroots solution. Teachers were helping teachers. Now, one particular educator, his name is Ashinda, he pushed the idea even forward. He argued that true improvement in teaching wasn't just about what the teacher did in the front of the room, but what the students were saying, what the students were doing, and what the students was thinking. He placed student discourse at the center, and that is what became a defining feature of what we now call lesson study, where the focus is not on what the teacher says, what the teacher does, but what the student is doing. Now, over time, lesson study became woven into Japan's national education system. And teachers met regularly to plan and to observe and to refine their lessons. And their findings were shared as research artifacts for others to learn from. Now, the results spoke for themselves. When Japanese students began excelling on international tests, researchers around the world started asking, what's going on? Because Japan was at the top. Their scores were incomparable to others. So now this piqued people's interest. That curiosity brought lesson study to the US in 1999 through the Tim's video study. A couple of our educational researchers like Stigler and Hebert and Fernandez and Lewis, they went to Japan and they learned about this lesson study. And then they translated this into English and started to share their research in America. And that's how America in 1999 adopted lesson study. And at its core, lesson study here in the US, it's a cycle. Teachers plan together. One teacher teaches while the other observes, and then the group comes back to analyze and revise. Importantly, the observations is not about evaluating teachers. It's about studying student learning. The goal is to uncover how students are making sense of math so we can adjust instruction to deepen their understanding. And all of this ties back to MathKind's first principle of effective teaching, focused on important content. In lesson study, teachers just don't pick any lesson. They zero in on the content that matters the most, the knowledge and the skills that will move students forward. So to put it all in a nutshell, lesson study is not just a one-time event. It's not one and done. It's not just a meeting. It's an iterative process. It's a cycle that repeats and it goes deeper over time. Teachers are coming together with a shared question. How can we improve student learning? Then, instead of talking in theory, they roll up their sleeves and they engage in a lesson or a cycle of inquiry. The group collaborates to plan a lesson with intentionality. One teacher is going to teach, and the others are there to observe, not to judge. They're there to study student learning in action. And afterwards, the group reflects, the group revises, and then they try again. So each cycle builds on the last. That's why we call it an iterative process of collaborative teacher inquiry. It's teachers learning from practice. It's not just about practice. And when you think about it, this mirrors the work we want our students to do in math, to inquire, to test, to revise, to learn deeply through iteration. Lesson study is the professional version of that same spirit of inquiry. And here's the important link. This iterative cycle aligns with the principle of effective teaching for MathKind. Every round of lesson study pushes us to ask, what's the important content? How rich are the tasks? Are we listening to the students' thinking? Are all our students engaged? What evidence are we collecting? In other words, Lesson study gives us a structure to live out the principles of effective teaching framework in action. So here are some key distinctions from a traditional professional development to lesson study. When we talk about professional development, many of us immediately picture familiar scene. We're just sitting in a large room, we're listening to a speaker, we're taking notes on strategies, which we might try or we might not try. That's a traditional period. And as I said before, it feels top down, it feels disconnected from the real challenges we face in our classroom. Lesson study flips that model on its head. Instead of just being handed some strategies, teachers are the drivers. It is grounded in real instruction, not just in abstract theory. The heart of the work happens in the classroom with live teaching, careful observation, and deep analysis of student thinking. And here is what makes it so powerful. Teachers aren't passive recipients of someone else's ideas. They are active agents of change. They're experimenting, they're reflecting, they're refining in ways that directly impact their students. Now, over time, this process builds leadership and expertise from within the school, rather than relying solely on outside experts. And this connects beautifully to principles of effective teaching. Lesson study allows teachers to model asking questions and listening, not just to each other, but to their students. It fosters equitable engagement because the focus is on how all students are experiencing the lesson. In short, professional development turns into a mirror of the kind of teaching we want to cultivate. So I want you to think back to the last PD you attended. Was it more traditional? Or would you have hoped that it would be more like this lesson study I'm talking about? So now that I learned about lesson study during my dissertation, I had to approach my principal with my ideas of sharing the lesson study because it was a complete change in the way our school handled professional development. And it was just me bringing up these ideas to her. So first I had to convince her why she should allow me to invest in lesson study as opposed to professional development. So I had to culminate all the positive reasons why, right? And
Nisha, it's a
yes.
question in the chat that says, how can lesson study be applied in a classroom with 35 or to 40 students? The reality of the current education system.
How can, thank you for that question. I am going to, I will share that answer a little way into the workshop, if that's okay. Because I'll come to your question and answer it because I'm going to tell you exactly how I set it up. So as I said, the first thing I did, very first thing, I had to get buy-in from my principal. I had to be given the opportunity to say, hey, this is something I'm reading about. This is something I'm learning about. May I please use this model instead of using professional development? So I had to give my principal a rationale for why we should have the lesson study. Right? So the first thing I did was I just told her the truth. In my class, in my grade level, our scores consistently were below standards. When the kids had to learn fractions, they consistently, remember I told you I've been teaching for 13 years, students consistently did not do well in fractions because it's just so abstract. So the first thing I had to do was tell my principal, hey, I want to use lesson study and I want our lesson study to focus on fraction. And I had to say, listen, if we do lesson study, it'll shift the focus away from the teacher. We're not evaluating a teacher. We would be deeply analyzing what works well with fractions and what does not. It would improve teachers' self-efficacy because they're buying into the learning process more. It's a safe space for us to experiment because we've been blindly following the curriculum, and that was doing us no good. So we could experiment in a safe space and change the curriculum to see what would happen. And we would be empowering our educators. So when I went to her with all this information, she said yes. And we were so excited. So this is the two other teachers. These were math coaches and a fellow teacher, and the three of us together. And I love this picture because we're wearing our superhero outfits because we decided we were going to change something. And that's what teachers do. We invest in ourselves to make changes for our students. So we didn't want another professional development. We wanted to try something new. And I want to say this, that we didn't experience lesson study before. It was something that wasn't done before. We didn't know about it. So we were learning and building the plane as we were flying. So the first thing, for those of you who are interested in doing a lesson study, I had to come up with a research context. So I used my school as the research context. And as I mentioned before, I work in a urban Title I school with a high needs population. I needed to focus on fraction instruction because that's where I figured we needed the most help in that particular domain. We started with 7 participants. You saw 3 of us already. The others were the teachers that were in 3rd grade. So I had to have the buy-in of all the teachers on my grade level. I had to have the buy-in of the math coaches as well as the principal. And we had to have some questions that would guide this lesson study. So the 2 questions that would guide us would be, how does lesson study influence our decision-making process? And how do teachers construct pedagogical strategies? And we knew that lesson study couldn't just happen one time. So we spanned it over 12 weeks with multiple meetings throughout the week. And we only worked on one lesson, but it took us 12 weeks to really dig deep into that one lesson. So lesson study is a time commitment. But when I tell you the results, it is so. So
there's another question in the chat. Is it
yes,
okay if I read it out loud?
absolutely.
¿Cómo un lesson study se puede relacionar en un aula con niños con autismo?
How lesson study can work in a class with kids with autism. Anisha, can you slow down a little bit so interpretation can be more fluent? Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. I am going to explain how the lesson study cycle can work, and it does not matter what type of classroom it is, if it's autism, if it's ESE or ELLs, English language learners, or special education. This model that I'm about to show you will work for any classroom. So lesson study has 4 stages to it. Stage 1 is goal setting and planning. Here, the first thing you got to do, number 1, is gather your team. Lesson study is not a one teacher job. You gather people, and it should typically be folks that are on your same grade level, or folks who are above, one grade level above or below you. So you need a combination of educators here. And you may have veteran educators and novice educators. Their skill level does not matter, but it has to be a committed group of individuals. The first in goal In stage one, your team comes together and you decide on the learning goals that matter the most. You study the curriculum, you study the standards, you anticipate how students might respond. This is where we focus on our important content, which connects back to MathKind's goals, focus on important content. We make sure our lessons aims for meaningful and significant learning. Collaborative planning allows us to think deeply about how to address misconceptions and design strategies that center our students' thinking. So in the first stage, you're meeting as a group, you are looking at your curriculum, you're picking a lesson or a standard or a content that you believe your students might struggle with, because that's the heart of what you want to improve on. So that's the first stage. In the second stage, that's the creation of the research lesson. This is where ideas from planning becomes a concrete lesson. This is where you are developing rich tasks to engage your students deeply and to make sense of concepts. Your tasks are intentionally designed to challenge learners while supporting them. So all of stage two is about building this lesson. In stage three, you are implementing and observing the lesson. One teacher is going to teach the lesson, and the others are going to look to see how kids are interacting with that content. They're collecting data. They're making notes. They're listening to conversations. They want to understand how students are reasoning and how adjustments can be made to the lesson. This is where MathKind's principles of effective teaching, ask questions and listen, comes to life. Stage 4 is on reflecting on the lesson. After you've implemented it, you've made notes about how it can be improved. You go back and you improve the lesson. Then in stage 4, we sit as a group again and we talk. How can we fix this lesson? What are the misconceptions we found? How can it be improved? And again, MathKind's monitoring, learning, and providing feedback and using evidence guides this cycle. Throughout this workshop, I want us to dive into each of these stages, and you will get a chance to practice each stage. It's going to be a mini lesson study that we're going to go into. I'll explain in detail what each stage looks like, and then we get a chance to practice this together. I hope you guys are excited, because I am so excited to share this with you. Okay, so this is stage 1. Stage 1 is not just one meeting, it's several meetings long. In stage 1, 4 things happen. The first thing that happens is you got to establish your norms. You got to decide how your meetings are going to be run. I used Catalyzing Change and Wagner's Community of Practice as a framework in coming up with my norms. If you look at the screen there, some of the norms were how we respect each other. What is the purpose of our group? What are the objectives we're trying to meet? So after we come up with the norms, the second thing we did was we clarified our lesson study goals. Our objective in that group that we formed together was to improve fraction by integrating conceptual and procedural components. Teachers felt like Our kids were exposed to procedural information on fractions way before they understood conceptually what fractions meant. So we made that goal like, hey, we want to slow down fraction instruction and focus on the conceptual part of it before we build out the procedural part. So we knew what our instructional focus was. Then we dove into a lesson study goal. Yes, we wanted to teach fractions. That was our instructional focus, but our overarching focus was to engage kids in academic dialogue, just like that teacher Ashinda did. We wanted kids to be able to speak to us mathematically, to assess the reasonableness of their solutions. Many times we give kids a worksheet and we just check off the worksheet, but we wanted not only that kids understood fractions, but that they were able to converse, to have academic dialogues about fractions. And the fourth part of that goal setting was to look at the current curriculum that we had. So in the US, we are given a curriculum that breaks down day by day what we are supposed to do. So since we knew our focus was on identifying fractions, we looked specifically at what the curriculum was telling us to do. And we highlighted, did this curriculum that we were expected to teach, did it match our instructional goals? Did the curriculum match our lesson study goals? So we used the curriculum as the baseline. Here's the tasks. Here are the standards. This is where we're starting from. So that was stage one of the lesson study process. So I want you all to just pause for a second and I want you to reflect. How was stage one, goal setting and planning, how is that different from a traditional PD? I'll wait for just a second. Let's see if anybody responds. Be brave. Come on. I challenge you. It's okay. I know about teacher wait time. Okay, well, let me share what other folks told me at this point. In a traditional PD, teachers receive a lesson or they receive a strategy and they're not given a chance to exploit deeply. They're not given a chance to anticipate student thinking or to collaborative meaningfully. In lesson study, however, we were able to dig deep into the curriculum that was provided and decide, does this curriculum match what we have identified as critical content? Does this curriculum match our overarching goals? We want kids to be able to speak to us academically. Does the current curriculum allow opportunities for that to happen? So in stage one, it was a whole lot of printing out the curriculum. We actually did this. We killed some trees back then. So we actually printed out the curriculum and we stuck that all across a wall. And we had our goals printed and we looked at every single thing we were supposed to do and we aligned it with, did this or would this help us meet our goal? Would it not? And what we discovered, guys, was that a lot of things we were supposed to teach actually distracted us from getting to our learning goal. There was a more efficient way of doing it. And because we had permission and buy-in from our principal, we were able to make modifications to our curriculum, which made our teachers so excited because they had that buy-in. So now I'm moving on to the second stage. The
We had
second stage.
some comments in the chat. Do you want us to read it?
I'm sorry?
We had some comments in the chat about your question.
Okay.
Okay,
Would you
so
read?
Diana says, how does the use of multiple representations in the instructional approach contribute to the construction of a conceptual knowledge before procedural fluency in fractions? Ariel is also saying traditional professional development is individual, focused on oneself. Meanwhile, lesson study is open to the community. And Diana is saying, unlike traditional professional development, which is typically individual and focused solely on the teacher, goal setting and planning within lesson study is a collaborative process in which participants establish common goals, discuss and reflect together to improve both practice and student learning.
Thank you for sharing. Yay! High five, high five, high five. That was well said. Way to go. I'm so excited. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So, that just energized me. So now I talked to you about stage one. Remember, in stage one, it's not just one meeting. It happened over several days, and we were just meeting to really dig deep into what the curriculum said we should do. In stage two, this is where it started to get really, really interested. Lesson studies started to take shape here. Now, remember I told you guys we printed everything we were supposed to do and we stuck it up on a wall? Then we went and we started crossing out, getting rid of stuff that did not take our kids where we wanted them to go. So we eliminated extraneous tasks and we built in tasks that we felt would help our students achieve the learning goals and the targets that we set out for them. And something we had to keep on the forefront of our mind was that balance of conceptual and procedural knowledge. We didn't just want kids to understand 1/2 is a half. We wanted them to truly understand what that meant because later on they had to compare fractions and we needed them to understand why 1/5 would be less than 1/2, even though they're seeing a 5 and a 2, because that abstractness was confusing to them. So we really focused on the conceptual part first. And together as a group, we started to build tasks. And what was something that was so cool was that the tasks we built had nothing initially to do with any signs or symbols or any fractions. We put that math to the side because if you think about it, kids know fractions. They share cookies. They share sandwiches. If you are in my classroom and you break a cookie in half, they are quick to tell you who got the bigger piece and who did not. And if you don't share that equally, they call you out about it. So they already know fractions. So we tapped into what they already knew and we built from that. So we were able to come up with some tasks, not as many as the district issued curriculum gave us. We came up with one really good task in that time that we were together, which honored their background, which had cultural connections to them, and which centered the conceptual learning before the procedural learning. And then something really cool happened in stage two. The teachers became the students. We did a whole switcheroo. After we created the task, we placed the task up on the board and we said, okay, now act like you're the student. How would a child solve this problem? Not how you in your teacher brain would solve it. How would a child attend to this problem? And having that lens and that opportunity to stop and think the way a kid does, or think of it as a student, as opposed to thinking about it as a teacher, helped us see some issues with our vocabulary. It helped us see where we could scaffold things a little more. And then it helped us provide a enhancement to the task. So that was something teachers did not have an opportunity to do before. Attend to the task as a student. Keep that in mind because I'm going to ask you now, how do you think the creation of the research lesson, how is that different from a traditional professional development? Mind you, I just gave you a hint. Now, wait a second. Right, a few more seconds. Any answers, Paula, in the chat? Liz? Okay, I'm sure it's coming. You guys make me proud out there, okay? All right, so some answers that I thought of in a professional
There's
learning.
one.
Oh, yes, yes, who is it?
Se diferencia por ser un proceso interactivo.
It is different because it's an interactive process.
Yes, yes. Good job, good job. High five.
We also have another one. So Ariel says, as teachers, we have to put ourselves in our students' shoes and see things from their perspective.
Oh, Ariel, that is so true. That is so, so true. And the group of teachers I showed you before, it was one of the few times they ever had an opportunity in that professional setting to attend to a task as a student. It was one of the few times they had an opportunity to build a task as a community together. So I realized the teachers were buying in because they were coming up with the problems. They were attending to the task. They left there so enthused and so energetic because it wasn't somebody giving you something anymore. It was something you were building with your colleagues. So it transformed the culture of our small group. It was such a beautiful thing to see. So that's why I would always advocate for lesson study. Now,
There's
here,
one more that
yes,
says
go ahead.
proceso con metodología
It is a
inclusiva
process with inclusive and interactive
desde
methodology.
Irlanda.
And this is an answer from Irlanda.
Thank you, Yolanda, for sharing that. And you are right, it is collaborative. That's the word that just runs this ship. Okay, we are on to the third stage. Remember, I told you there were four, so hang in there with me, guys. Third stage, we can do this. In the third stage, this is where lesson study is coming alive because now you're taking that lesson you just created, your baby, and now you get to teach your lesson to a group of kids. So there was 7 of us. We picked one teacher who would teach the lesson that we created. And the important focus here was not on how did the teacher teach, but how did the students react with the lesson. That was such a culture shift, a mind shift, because it took the stress and the strain off the teacher. I don't know about you guys, but in Florida, we get walked a lot. A lot of times administrations just walk through a room and they tell you they're not looking for anything, but when you see somebody come into your room and they got a piece of paper and they're doing this, your heart starts going pitter-patter. It's just life. People get nervous. So when we took that burden off the teacher who was going to teach, and we all knew it wasn't about how you were teaching, but what the kids were doing, that elevated some of that stress. So a couple things happened. One teacher taught, the other participants mingled through the room, and they took notes on what the kids were doing, what the kids were saying. We built a form that helped us look for certain things. What was the evidence of the students learning? Did they learn conceptual? Were they doing procedural stuff. What words were they saying? Were they speaking academically to each other? So that's where we collected all that data. So, I mean, we left there so enthusiastic and energized because we saw our lesson come alive, which leads me to my next question. Think about this. How does teachers observing a lesson, how is that different from a traditional PD? What do you think was different in that lesson study and in a PD? I'll wait a second. I know there's a little delay.
También pueden alzar sus micrófonos si lo desean.
And you can also open your mics to turn on your
Yes.
mics if you deem it reasonable.
Would love to hear from somebody.
So Nisha, we do have a response in the chat. Ariel says, the key point is that there are many more teachers working with students, and the work no longer falls on a single teacher. This joint collaboration is interesting, with more minds and eyes helping to improve the teaching learning process. Traditionally, it is difficult for a single teacher to both implement and observe at the same time.
Oh my gosh, Ariel, you are so right. And I do want to clarify something. The first time we implemented the lesson, one teacher was teaching and the others was just looking. And as teachers, you know what happens when you look over and you see a kid doing something, you start talking and engaging, and before you know it, you're teaching too. So what had happened in one of the first implementation was that two of the teachers were in small groups and they were speaking to the kids and leading the kids and guiding the kids. So in essence, there was three teachers teaching at the same time. We pulled back from that model and we discussed that we were not going to do that anymore, simply because we wanted to keep this authentic as possible. And in real life, it's only one teacher that teaches. There's not three teachers that teaches. So we decided going forward, only one teacher would teach and the rest of us would sit back and we would not intervene in the lesson to create a more authentic flow. But I love that you were able to identify that. Thank you, Ariel. Great job. And something else I'd like to add here. This was, and you hit the nail on the head when you said, it takes the stress out of watching the kids. I know when I'm teaching, I'm concentrating on what I'm saying, what I'm doing. And usually it's the kids who answer or respond quickly. I'm addressing those kids. And sometimes the kids that are on the perimeter of the classroom or the kids that are a little bit quieter, I may not get to. So having somebody else look purposefully at those kids who are below the radar and bring their work to light helped me understand how to formulate my work. So it's not only the quickest or the loudest students, but even the quietest students have a way to show their work. So thank you for that. All right. Now the very last stage, stage 4, woohoo, stage 4. This was the part that we got together and we got to reflect on the lesson. All those notes that we took, we came back together and we shared. We remember the focus and we started with saying the focus is not on the teacher. So one teacher would share, I heard a kid say this. I saw a kid did this. I saw a child confused when they did this. So we brought all those evidences together. For example, in one of our lessons, we had the kids divide something into 4. But because the paper that they were using was so big and we gave scissors, we realized that they spent a lot of time cutting things incorrectly. And that used up about 7 instructional minutes. So in the next iteration, when we heard all the comments and the feedback, we were able to take that giving a scissors out and replace that with using a whiteboard. That saved us 7 minutes worth of instructional time. So that reflecting on the lesson really helped us to tweak the same lesson. Guys, that's the key here. We didn't move on to lesson number 2. We took all the recommendations and we went back into the same lesson and we made changes. And then that new lesson was taught to a different 3rd grade class to see how they would respond to the lesson. So it was a chance to improve on it and teach it to a different group, which made us better at executing it and which made the lesson so much more richer, which goes back to Matkind's providing rich tasks. So y'all know it's coming. It's coming. How is the reflection part different from a traditional PE?
Hey, Nisha, we've got an answer in the chat. So Ariel says, traditionally, feedback is not usually given. It is very difficult to give feedback to many students, 30 to 40. What feedback options do you recommend for large groups?
Ariel, I knew you were going to get my back. I knew it, Ariel. So the feedback wasn't for the kids. The feedback was for each other. So we shared with each other what we can do to improve. So we didn't share anything yet with the children because remember, this was an experimental cycle. So the feedback in this case was just for the teachers' use. So if you're saying you want to give kids feedback, that might be something we would have done in one-to-one or small group setting. But in this scenario, the feedback was just for the other teachers. But I love your question. Now,
Tenemos un comentario más que dice de Irlanda.
One more commentary from Irlanda. It says the traditional is more conceptual and it's about memory. Now I think it has to be more collaborative, dynamic, and transformative.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Yolanda. It has to be. If we need to change how the kids are performing, we need to change how we teach. It has to be collaborative. So thank you for that. All right. I have been talking to you for about an hour now. So before we go on, this is a good, take a second, take a breath, take a stretch, take a stretch. All right. I got something really cool. I would like you to try lesson study now. Are you guys interested in trying it? Just a little bit, a little bit. I promise you, it's going to be fun. Promise. Okay. Work with me here, people. 30 minutes. We can do this. All right. It's going to change your world. I promise. Okay. So this is the standard in English that we were basing our lesson study on. I'll read it to you. It says, represent and interpret unit fractions in the form 1 over n as the quantity formed by one part when a whole is partitioned into n equal parts. So I did a little research, and forgive me if I'm wrong. The closest I could find to the US standard was this standard, which I will not read in Spanish because y'all would not want me to do that. So if somebody would read that for me in Spanish. Oh wait, it comes in Spanish, right? So if you would read it in Spanish, you would see the closest alignment that I could find. So here's your job now, my friends. Remember, I just went through all 4 stages with you. You all remember? So I want you to pretend for a second we are all lesson study buddies. And this is our very first meeting. And we have established our goal We know what our benchmarks are. And I know you can go digging into a curriculum right now. So I found a task that aligns with this goal. So I just wanted to give you a few minutes. In our first meeting, what would you establish as our norms? Take a moment. Consider, how will your team work together? What expectations and role would guide this collaboration? Think about creating a safe space where everyone's voice is heard and all students' learning is valued. So if you can, in the chat, you can just drop what would be some norms you would like to see. While you're doing that, think about our instructional focus. Identify a key concept from this benchmark or skill you want students to learn. For today, as I said, our focus is representing and interpreting unit fractions. Ask yourself, what do students need to understand conceptually before they focus on these procedures? And again, this ties back to MathKind's focus on important content. Now you decide, what could be some lesson study goals that you would want your team to focus on? Do you want your kids to speak academically, mathematically? Is that something that you would like them to do? And then think about your curriculum that you are given. Could you consider what might be the tasks or the strategies that are in that curriculum? So I'll give you a couple minutes if you want to jot anything down in the chat and share with me. But this is the template that guided our stage one. And for the sake of time, I'll move on a little bit faster, but I will give you 1 minute.
Nisha, before we have some comments, maybe it's good also for me to share. Diana says the main difference is that in the research lesson, teachers collaborate as a team, while one teacher implements the lesson, the others observe carefully how students respond and learn. This collective observation allows for multiple perspectives and deeper reflection, something that's not common in traditional professional development, where usually one teacher works alone and the focus is more on theory than on practice.
Absolutely.
Ariel also mentioned very good methodology. Now, the difficult part is collaborating with other teachers, as everyone has a full schedule, but it would be interesting to make time to apply this. And Diana, again, answering to the questions, says establishing norms, instructional focus, lesson study goals, curriculum engagement, just naming again the steps.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. Oh, you made my teacher heart so happy. Thank you. Okay, so I gave you a few minutes to show you this is the protocol that we used for stage one. So just because of time, I pre-filled it out for you with the magic of the internet. So these were some of the things that we used in our first couple of meetings, right? So we picked norms that were about creating a safe space, a collaborative environment. We wanted all the voices to be heard. We wanted our teachers to be actively listening and to focus on student thinking rather than teacher performance, right? Next, for our instructional focus, we came up with a conceptual goal, and that is students understand 1/4 as one part of a whole divided into 4 equal pieces. The procedural goal is that they could shade and label one part of the rectangle accurately. And then for the lesson study goal, again, we wanted to focus solely on building that academic talk. And as I said before, we used the curriculum that we were given as our starting point. So this is how we built our template for stage one. So for stage two, this is what our template looked like. We knew what the task was, but we had to decide, what does that conceptually look like? What does that procedurally look like? And what strategies will we use? And again, for the sake of time, I'm going to, by the magic of the internet, fill this out for you. So conceptually, these were some things that our teachers really wanted kids to get. Now, if you notice, there is a huge change from this slide. I want you to specifically look at the task. I think I have a button here that draws. Specifically look at this task. Divide a rectangle into 4 parts. Shade one part. What fraction of the rectangle is shaded? Notice in the curriculum, and this is day 1 of teaching, the word fraction is thrown to the kids on day 1. And we decided as a team to just take that word fraction and put it to the side. Yes, we were teaching fractions, but on day 1, we felt like maybe they didn't need to focus just yet on the word fraction. Instead, I want you to pay attention to what the task became. Let me read it to you. It says, Maria and her grandmother made a tray of tamales for a community celebration. They wanted to share the tray equally amongst 4 families. Maria draws lines to divide the tray into 4 same-sized parts. She colors in one part to show what one family will receive. The task changed to reflect one of our families or a couple of our families. At that time, we had a couple families from Latin America. So we wanted to honor these children. And I believe this task was done this time last year, and it's Hispanic Heritage Month. So we created a task that reflected the cultures in our school, and we were using some of the locally foods that they would be accustomed to. So we changed a generic task that said, cut a rectangle into 4 parts to something with, hey, there's tamales. Tamales are put in this tray. We're going to share this tray equally. How much would one family get? And if you notice conceptually, we wanted them to come away from the idea of just first learning what a fraction was. We used words like they will get 1 out of 4 parts. And that phrase, 1 out of 4 parts, eventually flipped and became a procedural symbol 1/4. So we really took time to build the conceptual by using a culturally rich tasks. So that's what we spent our time creating this lesson. Now, I know it just seems like one task, but let me tell you all how long it took us to come up with such a task. Now, in our the second part of our second step, after we created the task, now we had to attend to this task as if we were the student. So we built the task and then we acted like the kid. This is an example of what somebody did. They drew an entire tray, cut it into 4, and then colored in one piece, which is exactly what we wanted the kids to do. But then somebody else created the tray and cut cut it into 4 pieces, but the pieces weren't equal because that's probably what kids would do. So that's why we had to go in back there and say they shared equally. So having that perspective as a student helps you tailor your work and your task becomes even richer. Now, after we created the task, somebody had to teach it, all right? So for the sake of time, I was going to ask somebody to teach it, but we're going to move on. So one teacher would implement the task, and everybody else is taking notes to see what kids are doing. How are they making this? We put out a lot of math manipulatives there. Were you drawing? Were you cutting? So we were observing and documenting what kids were doing. Then that led to the final part where we got together. Look at us all happy there. We got together and we were able to talk about it. What went well? What could have been improved? What changes did we need to make to this lesson? And then we repeated the cycle again with a different class. So this one lesson, I want to tell you, it went through 3 or 4 iterations till we built what we thought was the perfect lesson. Now, there is no such thing as a perfect lesson, but the lesson was tested. It was effective. And I want to tell you guys something I'm so proud of. That unit test, when we gave it, it was the first time our kids scored higher in all the years I've been teaching. Now, it's not crazy, like they went up like by 15%. I wanted more, but 15% was a lot for the first go around. And that gave us even more buy-in, where the principal said, hey, let's do this lesson study again. So it worked. I'm telling you, we saw a difference in our math scores. It worked. And if one go around gave us an increase of 15%, could you imagine how much more we grew? By the end of the kids' transition into fourth, they went from being the whole grade level. I think they started off at 16% proficiency. By the time they left us, 55% of the grade level was proficient. 55, from 16 to 55. I count that as a success. And it was because we were given the opportunity and time to invest in lesson study. Now, this is the biggest thing I need to tell you. The biggest thing. This critical incident.
Nisha, there's another comment.
Go ahead.
Irlanda says, tarea con ejemplificación lúdica y manipulativa.
Irlanda mentions it's a work with examples and it's a manipulative activity.
Aprovecho también para pedirte
Yes.
pauses un poquito más.
I would also ask if you could pause a little bit before the next stage, though it's for the interpretation services.
Okay. All right. So this is the last bit that I have for you, but this is the most powerful part of the lesson study to me. I call this the critical incident, and I want to see if you could figure out what went wrong here. We wanted to create a lesson using the linear model to teach unit fractions. And this was the model a teacher came up with. Do you see a problem with this model? At first, I did not see a problem with this model. And I have presented many times at many math conferences, and I did not see a problem with this model. And this led to something so eye-opening to me. Let me share it with you. We wanted to expose our kids to the linear model to teach unit fractions. But what we ended up showing our kids was the area model. And this, guys, is where the power of lesson study shines. It doesn't just reveal student misconceptions, it also surfaces teachers' misconceptions and habits. In this case, our team did not realize that we were confusing an area model with a linear model. We did not distinguish them clearly because we didn't at that point understand the differences. We just knew, hey, we only teach area model, we want to teach the linear model, but then we diverted back to teaching area model. And this is not a failure. It is a gift because it allowed teachers to realize that even though we were so-called the experts or we knew everything, The truth was we had misconceptions in our own understanding. And the fact that we created the norms that we did, we created a safe space where we could say, okay, guys, we did not have the correct understanding of this model. And think for a second how powerful that is. When you're in a group and you could say, I don't understand, I don't know. And we didn't know that we didn't know until we dived deep into this lesson. We realized that some of the things we were teaching, we didn't have the correct understanding of it. And I found this to be the most powerful part of lesson study. The fact that it revealed teachers' gaps and that the teachers could go back and relearn, and the teachers could say, I don't know, because too often that stresses on us to be the experts in the room. And when you're in a group of like-minded people, you can say, I don't know, and there's somebody in there that can support you and help you. So this was a hard lesson for us to bear, because at first it did hurt our feelings. Like, how did we not catch this? But it showed us that we were human and that we were vulnerable, and it built in us a growth mindset that's what we hope to foster in our students. So this is why I always will push lesson study, because it gives you a chance to learn math in a different way. And it's okay to say, I don't know. It is okay to say it. I say it all the time.
Before we move on, Nisha, we did have a comment in the chat about the lesson plan. Ariel says each one represents 1/4 as what was wrong with the original, or what was the mistake.
Yes, and Ariel, it was the drawing itself, the area model is fine. The point is we wanted to use the linear model, and the issue is the linear model represents length, and we were using the area model to represent length. So it didn't connect with us until after we were teaching, and we were like, wait, this model is not representing what we meant it to represent. So that's how we learned that linear models should be length, and area models it's not length. So that's how we learned that. So as we come to the end of this is a cool graphic I wanted to leave you with. Lesson study is about planning, teaching, reflecting, and refining. One member of your team comes together and collectively you make your plans, and you make it based on the culture that you're in, the school that you're in, the goals that you have. You teach, then you reflect on your lesson, and then you refine your lesson. And it's a continuous cycle. Please, I beg you, don't just do one iteration and stop. After you refine your lesson, go back and teach that lesson again. And I bet you there'll be something else you can do to tweak it. Initially, as I told you, we did 3 iterations, 3 or 4. On our first iteration, we used scissors. We had the kids using scissors, and we realized that was taking too much time. So we replaced that with whiteboards. But by the 3rd iteration, we were realizing, well, we're not planning for UDL, Universal Design of Learning. We should embed some technology into a lesson. So instead of teaching whole group, we broke up the lesson into different small groups where some kids were drawing, some kids were using the computer to generate it. So there was different aspects of learning going on. So we kept building and building till we brought in back the connected kind of tactile form of learning. So please, I beg you, if you do this, keep refining your lessons and maybe do it 3 or 4 different times till you have that one great lesson, and then keep that in your teacher bank for the next use. So as I close today, I want to leave you with some action strategies that connect directly back to Mankind's principles of effective teaching and to the spirit of lesson study. Remember, the first thing is collaborative planning. Plan together, focus on important content, design rich tasks that gives all your students a chance to think deeply. Second, I implore you, create a safe space for reflective dialogue. Just as we ask our students to share their reasoning without fear of being wrong, we also need spaces where teachers can talk openly, noticing our own misconceptions and how we can grow together. And this connects back to Mankind's questioning and listening, not just the students, but we need to question and listen each other. The third thing I implore you to do, use data-driven reflection. Use what you observe in your classroom, use what you're seeing your kids engaging with, and look for opportunities where equity gaps may exist. Look at what instructional moves matter most. Think about monitoring and learning and providing feedback, not for the teachers, but for the kids too. And finally, adaptive teaching. Each refinement we make, each adjustment to our questions, to our scaffolds, to our models, that shows your commitment to ensuring equitable engagement. So these are the action steps. Plan together, teach bravely, reflect honestly, and refine continuously. And my closing thought, just as we want students to see mistakes as opportunities, lesson study reminds us that teaching is never about perfection. It is about growth. When we ground ourselves in the work, when we ground ourselves in Mankind's principles of effective teaching, we are not just improving lessons. We're building a culture where every student learns and every teacher has a chance to learn deeply and to thrive. So I want to thank you for having me today. I want to thank you for coming today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Nisha. We really appreciate you being here and presenting with us today. The participants will be able to find the ticket or the lesson study this session in exit survey in the chat. If you can't find it, please let us know, and either myself or Pal will be able to help you with that. Thank you again for being here and joining us for our math marathon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. See y'all later.